E Dirty. Welcome to Joe Braymeyer Presents.
There we are. Our little walk-up music, huh? And I think we got the TikTok audio figured out too, so that's good. That's good.
Better to be dead and cool than live and uncool.
All right. Welcome to Joe Braymeyer Presents. I'm Joe Braymeyer, and I've got as always, an extra special guest with us today, Christopher Waugh, who I've been getting to know pretty well, just a little bit out there beforehand. Dean at St. Ambrose University, husband, father, exerciser, all those things. So we'll chat about all that here shortly, Christopher. Welcome to the show.
Great. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
And by the way, this show is brought to you by our friends at Treadmill Heroes. So fitness equipment, new and used for your home or your facility. And as a matter of fact, we've got something kind of cool we're doing for the first time ever. We're doing a fitness garage sale, May 2nd and 3rd. We've got like 7 buildings of stuff.
Oh, I bet.
Like stuff from like bar collars to random dumbbells to benches. I mean, it's everywhere. So we decided we're going to do a garage sale on the actual garage sale weekend here in Wilton.
Great.
And so it'll be from our garage to all of yours. Come on in, and we're literally selling this stuff at garage sale pricing just because we need the room. So Christopher Waugh, thank you for coming in here.
It's great to be here, Joe. Thanks for the invite.
How did we even connect the dots on this?
Jeremy.
Yeah.
Yep. Jeremy was on your show last week, I think.
It was like a week or two ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And I know him from Corumdale Bible Church in Davenport. And we were literally just walking down the hallway. And he said, hey, I know somebody you should talk with. Connected to St. Ambrose. And
yeah,
I love talking about St. Ambrose. So
we're going to dive in.
Happy to do it.
Yeah. You know what? Let's get into a fun one right out of the gate.
Sure.
Because last night I put a little teaser video out about you coming in.
Yeah.
So I asked my Chat GPT companion, Orko, and he's been on the show once or twice. I'm like, tell me some things about St. Ambrose.
Nice.
And he said that it said that one of the halls is haunted at St. Ambrose. Walk me through what you know about this.
So our vice president for communication forbid me to talk about this one. No, I'm just kidding. It's not controversial. Yeah, I've heard of it too. St. Ambrose, or Ambrose Hall is the oldest building on our campus.
How old?
And well over 100 years old, because we have a dorm that's 100 years old. So, or just over 100 years old. But Ambrose Hall, it's that beautiful building on Locust. It's just this long, circuitous building, brick, very stately.
Is it like real close to the road there?
Fairly close. There's a lawn of oak trees in front of it, but but it's you can't miss it when you're on Locust.
All right, so Ambrose Hall,
and it houses it has apartments for our priests. It also has faculty staff offices. The president's office is there. We have classrooms in that space. We have a student social space, a coffee shop.
So where's the ghost?
Well, the stories I've heard is that folks who are in their offices or students who are studying in some of the classrooms at night, it's always at night, never during the day, will hear, sometimes footsteps or sometimes voices, and sometimes it's, you would think it's a big building. Of course you're going to hear footsteps, but, it's like 10 p.m. or sometimes the voices are voices that you typically wouldn't hear in an old building at 10 p.m., like children laughing.
Oh, that gives me the willies.
Right.
Oh, man.
So I have never encountered any of that.
You've never even had a cold chill on the back of your neck?
No, I've never. And I've been in the building late, and I've been kind of hoping to encounter, or hear something or think, oh, okay, that's what they're talking about, but never myself.
Yeah.
So, but that's the story, and we hear it every year.
By new people?
Yeah, by new people.
So that doesn't creep you out?
Well, I'm Christian, and it's a supernatural faith, and so I don't discount anything in the spiritual realm, but I don't fear any of it either. And so I think I'm a skeptic when it comes to this stuff. I think it's an old building. There's echoes. There's it just makes noises. So
Sure.
And we all have active imagination. So that's my take.
Yeah, I also believe that until you actually experience something yourself, it's hard to buy into it.
For sure.
Right?
For sure.
Like I'll give you one. So I never believed in any sort of UFOs or anything like that, even within the last 2-3 years, right? But I woke up, I fell asleep on our living room couch one night, and we have these tall windows that when you're laying on the couch, you're just looking right up at the sky. And there was like 2 stars in the sky.
Right.
And I just was standing there staring at it because I was wide awake. And then all of a sudden, the one star just started going down a little bit slower and a little bit slower and a little bit slower. And then it would move a little bit and then go down a little bit slower.
All right.
But the other stars didn't move at all.
Right.
And it was moving in a very strange way. And then eventually it went below the windowsill and I couldn't see it. And I just thought, that was the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And it wasn't like a falling star. It wasn't an airplane. Right. It just moved strange. And then at that point, I think you have a kind of a paradigm shift, right? Where you're like, oh, maybe I need to like look into it.
Well, and your house isn't in New Jersey, right?
Correct.
Where they were saying
No, which by the way, I have an uncle who lives out there.
Yep.
And I was calling him during all the drone madness.
Right.
And I was like, is this really a thing? He's like, oh, dude. He's like, we were out at the golf course about 2 days ago. And he's like a year-round member of the course. So even if it's like in the middle of fall and stuff, they're out there messing around.
Totally.
He's like, there was a drone that came down and hovered above the water tower that we can see from the course. Wow. And he's like, it was easily the size of an SUV because it was right next to the water tower. So you had like a perspective on it.
I heard about that, yeah.
And he's like, and then it just flew off, and I'm like,
which is why they didn't want to shoot him down because they were so big.
Yeah, like what do you do?
Right.
What was your take on that, by the way?
Gosh, it seems like didn't the government say what it was a few weeks later?
Nope. It was just they were just going out to sea and coming back, and it was like, don't believe your lion eyes, folks. Nothing to see here.
My thought is that it was probably the U.S. government testing our technology. Is my optimistic view.
Yeah.
My hopeful view on that.
I have a lot of views. My hopeful view on it is kind of similar to yours, where it's almost a way to just get people used to the idea of that, so the next time you see it, it's not as much of a shock.
Right.
And I think a big part of it too is like, we don't have to ignore the fact that Casey just dropped something over there. I think we at least need to point it out just so we can make her face turn red.
I was just trying to look.
Yeah. If this was a professional operation, we would have just kept going, but I'm not a pro. I want to at least embarrass Casey about it. Anyway, no, I think it's a way to get people used to just seeing something that would normally freak them out.
Okay.
And
so what do you think that they're wanting to fly over the country, that they want people to get used to?
I think there's a lot of brand new technology that they want to start integrating into, first of all, military life, but then eventually it turns into civilian life. Yeah. And I think if we're just not so shocked to see a big thing zooming around in the sky, then it doesn't really bother us as they grow.
It's amazing how quickly we adapt. I remember back in, this was probably the late 90s, I was listening to the radio, and they had just come out with this book, and I think it was called This Digital Day. And this was 98, 97, and they sent photographers all over the world with one assignment, and the assignment was capture how technology engages with human living in one day. They all did it on the exact same day.
In different areas of
all over the world.
Okay.
And one of the things that they noticed back in the mid-late 90s was that the average person was photographed 10 times a day. And back then,
Wow, in the late 90s?
That's a really big deal. So
I want to make sure I was hearing that right. So
Yeah.
10 times a day in the late 90s, the average person was photographed, not necessarily posing for a picture,
no,
but
this was-
photographed through different things.
Totally.
Okay, go ahead. I
So
just
the
want to
internet-
understand.
The internet was a thing, but social media wasn't a thing. Smartphones weren't a thing yet. So not everybody had a camera in their back pocket. So this was, bank teller machines, stoplights, surveillance cameras, and and that was really startling at the time because I remember in 1984, I was in the 7th grade and we read the book, and we were all completely terrified by this thought of, constant surveillance. But by the mid-late 90s, it was normative, and now we're uploading our
We're surveilling ourselves gladly,
right.
agreeing to terms.
Totally.
I wonder what that number is now. Do you have any idea?
Oh, gosh. I wouldn't.
How many
even wanna
times
guess.
the average person is photographed?
Wouldn't even want it. Well, my phone knows where I'm going before I go. I'll get in the car, and it gives me a map to where I'm headed.
Can you search that, Bart? How many times the average, how about just in America? How many times the average American is captured on camera throughout the course of 24 hours? I wonder what that number is.
Yeah. Not counting how many times they capture themselves and send it to.
Yeah, and you couldn't take into consideration like every time your content is shared. It's just like freshly,
Right.
How many times when was that? What was that book called?
I think it was called This Digital Day. I can't believe I remember it.
And when did you read it?
I didn't read it. I heard about it on NPR, 97 or so. It was one of those coffee table books that they made, at the time.
Looks like a study from 2020, 238 times a week.
Wow.
Man, that's nuts.
That's alarming.
And you think by putting your phone in a Faraday bag, you're good to go. Yeah, you ain't.
Nobody's safe.
You ain't good to go. What does this mean? St. Ambrose first VP for student engagement.
Sure.
What is that? How's that title break down?
So I'll start with our president. I almost said new president, but she's been with us for, almost going on 5 years. Amy Novak. She's one of the best bosses I've ever had. And
Why?
she's super smart. She's very innovative. And she is constantly looking ahead for what the needs are. She's really great, and she's great at helping her cabinet, the vice presidents who report to her, think like that too. Think strategically. And so one of the things that Amy is doing with the university, with the help of faculty, the staff, our board, is really positioning Ambrose as a place that educates students for work skills for the future. And so we're
Like real life stuff.
real life stuff. So and it's founded on and anchored in the life and teaching of St. Ambrose of Milan, our patron. And it's anchored in 4 primary values: courage, wisdom, justice, and service. Those are all anchored in, the life and teachings of St. Ambrose of Milan, who modeled and devoted his life to Jesus Christ. So in many ways, it's an education anchored in Christ. And we have a chapel on our campus, that's called Christ the King Chapel. So it's a combination of faith, of reason, and teaching students how to do work skills with conscience, with heart, with courage, wisdom, justice, service. And it's just been a ton of fun. I don't know if I've ever worked as hard as I've ever worked in my career up to now, but I've never had more fun because we're always looking at things differently and thinking about things differently. Even technology, for instance, is another great example of, how do we leverage technology to help students make it easier to do what they do while they're on our campus. Everything from, using chatbots and helping, gentle nudge reminders for students on different deadlines, and setting up appointments with different offices that they need to see, to just delivering tutoring and day-to-day services for students, and using AI as well as the in-person, face-to-face tutoring. So it's just been a lot of fun.
So you guys are integrating AI. You're embracing it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're I remember, when ChatGPT came out, everybody was, in higher ed, there were big conversations about how you're going to prevent cheating. We're really kind of going in the other direction with it. How do we help students engage with it? How do we leverage it? How do we teach them to use it?
That's refreshing to hear. Yeah. That's very refreshing to hear.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a lot of places right now that are just almost running away from it, like it's going to go away.
Right.
And it's not. You got to run right at it.
You got to run right into it, and that's where and the workforce of tomorrow is ever changing. In fact, there are statistics that talk about how 40% of the jobs in 10 years haven't even been invented yet. So we're educating students on how to be nimble and how to have a basic skill set that leverages change and moves with it. So kind of like I think what you're doing with your business is that, when we were talking earlier about how, you had the 1.0 version, the 2.0, you just kind of have to read the signs and adapt as you go. And that's really what we're trying to educate, how we're educating students to think about life at St. Ambrose.
So from a structure standpoint, and this might sound like a dumb question, most people might know this, but you've got the president of the college, and then you've got the VPs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And you're one of them.
I'm one of them.
Is the VP also a dean by default? Or like what's the difference between a VP and a dean?
No, that's a great question. So for me, it is. It's I'm vice president for student engagement and dean of students, and so you're like the writer and the producer. In some way,
I mean, so your name is in the credits at the end of the movie twice.
For sure. Yeah.
Okay.
No doubt about it. And I'm charged with life outside of the classroom and helping students to thrive while they're at campus. So I oversee the residence halls, our counseling center, health services, student leadership, student activities, our student tutoring, student success center, security. So
as the VP.
Yes.
That's a lot of hats.
It is, and it's a ton of fun. And the students are constantly, we're just constantly working with students to adapt to what they need and what they need from us. And I just love going to work. There's no 2 days have ever been the same. Early in my career, I had a job where I was just watching the clock. It was just torturous, and I vowed to never have that.
What was that?
I was a coordinator for events, and so I
at Ambrose?
No. This was several institutions ago.
Okay, got it.
But it was for a university, and so when we were on, and it was all the time. But when the season was slow, it was really torturous to just sit there and try to,
I bet.
So we're going nonstop, year round. People sometimes ask, "Oh, do you work in the summer?" And summer is maybe our busier time because we don't. That's our time to plan and to finish preparation for the next year.
How many VPs are there at the college?
There's 5. I'm pretty sure it's 5. So there's a.
Well, it sounded like you're overseeing every department. Like, what are the other VPs doing?
No,
are they staring at the clock?
Oh no, no, far from it. In fact, sometimes I think I'm the least busy of the VPs. We have a chief financial officer, vice president, and chief financial officer. We have a vice president for academic services and our provost, who each one of these vice presidents, as I name each one of them, I'm thinking in my head, well, they're the busiest, and no, Joe's the busiest, but it's really they do remarkable work. We have a vice president for marketing and communications and enrollment management, so that's a big job for a VP.
A lot of pressure on that right now. Yeah. Right?
Absolutely.
A lot of pressure on enrollment and getting kids in there to even just look around and consider Ambrose.
Right, because we were talking earlier about the in 2008, 2009, the recession. Well, Americans stopped having as many children back then.
Yes.
Starting then. And so there was what they're calling the enrollment cliff. And those babies that weren't born would have been hitting college age now. And so we're now experiencing that there are much less.
I've never heard that.
Yeah.
But that makes total sense.
Yeah, totally. So it's a big part of the challenge too. So.
Yeah, I know that's a big thing with a lot of colleges is just getting people through the door.
Absolutely.
And figuring out new ways to market and.
Right. Well, the other thing too is, and everyone's talking about, pre-COVID, post-COVID. COVID, in many ways, normalized the phenomenon of online learning. People got comfortable with it really quickly because they had to. And so ever since then, colleges have really been trying to respond to that, like a growing desire for more online. And so we're doing online classes, we're doing hybrid, we're doing in person, because students want all of it. And then we're also reaching out to folks who are mid-career who want to come back and retool and get a certification in some area, or just skill up in some other area.
What is Ambrose game plan and in their playbook to get more people there? Because if you look at it just from a business standpoint, when business is low, the knee-jerk reaction is to slash prices. Mm-hmm. Or like when a city is in trouble and they need more people, they're like, well, we'll build some low-income housing and we'll take the government subsidy and we'll bring in anybody and come one, come all, because it's more people and we need more people. Yeah. So how does Ambrose ensure that you're getting the right kind of Ambrose people in there that you want, right?
No doubt. There's a couple things. We've not done the price slashing, and fortunately we've not felt pressure to have to do that. But the thing that we're really keeping our eyes on is what are the students needing and how do we deliver that to them, as efficiently and as inexpensively as possible. And then add value. Once they're with us, how do we show them opportunities they didn't even know existed? So, for instance, when I went to college, I had no idea my career even existed. And so what are ways that we're showing students new opportunities, new doors that they might not have known about? How do we grab what they're interested in, what their aptitudes are, what their skills are, and give them a breadth of knowledge in a liberal arts context, but then anchor it in actual, work skills that allows them to, because most statistics show that most people change their career path between 4 and 7 times. So it's not like, the old model of thinking about work was you graduated and you got one job and you were a company, employee for your entire career, but that's just not what people are doing now. So
in business, you'll look at graphs to see like, okay, this portion of people did business with us because of this reason, this reason, this reason. And if I was to go walk around campus and talk to 100 freshmen and simply ask them in 1 or 2 sentences, why did you choose to come to Ambrose? What's the number one reason? Is it geography? Is it something else? Like what are some of the big parts of that pie why people come?
Well, you wouldn't have to go around and ask them because I already did.
Oh, great. So what are the reasons?
We did a pulse survey in February, and we were asking students about, what are the things that, you most are excited about St. Ambrose. And the top 2, and this actually grew, it started as a top 1 in the first year, and then it grew second year and third year even more, was my classes, my faculty. So, if it boils down to it, that's our widget. That's what we produce.
So is that, not to interrupt you, Christopher,
no, right.
but that sounds more like a why do you enjoy Ambrose kind of question. Because like if I'm like deciding what college to go to, like for me, like Joe, why did you attend Western Illinois? Because of the weight room. I walked in, I saw the weight room, I loved it. I said, and me and my mom bailed on the rest of the tour. I said, I'll just go there. It's close enough to home. I love the weight room. So what are those like simple answers? Like, you know what? A big reason why people come here is this, and for convenience sake, maybe, or maybe it's something else.
Sure, got you. We need to get our vice president for enrollment in here to talk to you about that. But I'll do my best.
If you had to guess,
it's more than a guess. I have a pretty good sense of it. And I will say it's our academic programs that we offer. Are they relevant? Are they going to, we have students who are really interested in building skills. These are folks who want to go to work. They want to make an impact on their community. They want to have families. So they're looking for practical education. It's grounded in Catholicism. It's grounded in our Christian context. So that really is. But then, I was having dinner this past Friday with a couple alums, one was an accounting major. The other is just finished his doctorate in physical therapy. They both came for the programs, but they also came because Ambrose, and this is something not a lot of people realize, was actually cheaper for them than a state school near their house. So after financial aid and, after, when they did all the math, they realized that it was actually cheaper to go to St. Ambrose. And that's, I think, a big misperception that people have is, well, let me just go to a state school because it's cheaper. That's not necessarily the case. For Stephen and Morgan, they came to Ambrose for the academic program.
Because you're well known. So, I mean, that's a good way to attract the right kind of people.
Right.
If you're better known for your academics than you are your weight room, like the reason why I went to Western, then I get it. You're going to attract some good clientele.
And I'm not saying that students don't come for other reasons. So we get a lot of students whose siblings attended Ambrose and loved it, or parents. We have students who are coming and excited to play a sport and continue on and playing a sport that they played in high school. So that's a big reason as well. And then, one of the things that we did find in our recent survey too is that students absolutely loved the friends that they were making. That was probably the biggest piece. And so one of the things I love about Ambrose, that's very different from the last institution where I worked, which was out on the coast. Ambrose students engage with each other across differences. At other institutions I've been at, black students hang out with black students, white students hang out with white students, etc. Not at Ambrose. Everyone comes together and engages, and I think that community becomes a really important piece of what they love about St. Ambrose.
What's the relationship between a St. Ambrose and a city of Davenport or a chamber of commerce? Mm-hmm. Because you guys need each other.
No doubt.
So who's got more, I don't want to say leverage, but I got to imagine there's like meetings that take place. Be like, are we benefiting each other the best way we possibly can, right? Because the more people Ambrose bring in, the better it is for the city. And people might go, you know what, I love this town. I went to college here. I'd love to move to the Quad Cities. So like, what do those conversations look like?
There are a lot of them, and they're on all different levels. So Amy, our president, is very connected with the chamber, and it's the Quad Cities chamber. And I sit on what's called the Hilltop Village board. And so that's the businesses and colleges that kind of share a geographic region in that area of Davenport. We call ourselves the Hilltop Village, and I sit on that board. And, we participate in community surveys. We communicate on events that we're doing. When students are oriented to campus, we make sure that they're aware of what's on the hilltop, what businesses are there, what things that they might want to do just on weekends. They're in the downtown Davenport area. But then we're also very involved with our surrounding community. And we're at their houses every year. We do an event called Be the Difference Day, where we rake leaves from the fall. There's a lot of elderly families that live around there, elderly couples, so we take care of their lawns for them. We just had a city meeting. Whenever the university wants to make any major changes on campus, we call a city meeting or a neighborhood meeting, and we throw it up on the screen. Here's what we're planning on doing. What's your feedback? And this most recent community meeting, they had some feedback for different buildings and where they were positioned, and that made an impact. We made changes based on that conversation. So it's important. It's an important part.
I mean, who needs who more? I mean, you could argue it both ways.
Yeah, for sure.
If St. Ambrose was to fold, that would be a major body blow to the economics of the Quad Cities.
No doubt.
And so, you know what I mean? Like, I'm thinking of it that way, where it's like, who's playing nice and who's playing too nice?
Yeah. One of my favorite theologians is Charles Spurgeon. And he was asked one time, what's more important for a Christian, prayer or the Bible? And he said, that's like asking what's more important for breathing, inhaling or exhaling. And, I feel like that's kind of what our relationship is like with the community. I don't think one is more important than the other. We need each other. no doubt.
Yeah, there's like I said, you could make the argument both ways. I've never had that. I've never been able to ask anybody that question, like, what is that dynamic like?
Yeah. Yeah.
But it sounds like everybody's getting along just fine.
Yeah, for sure.
So, big week for the Catholics. You guys have been busy. Easter, Pope, all the things.
No doubt.
Give me your take.
Well, Easter is the most important. I mean, there's another. Christmas or Easter. What's more important? The birth of Christ or his resurrection,
or the resurrection. Yeah.
I tend to get most excited about the resurrection, just because without the resurrection we wouldn't be able to be united with Christ. That's one of the things I love about Christianity is you've got me as a sinner, and then you've got God through Christ who atoned for that sin, and at the resurrection they come together, and that's where I get joy. That's where I get Christ. That's where his perfect life atones for my sin, and without it, so God basically counts to me his perfection and puts my sin on Christ and his death on the cross, and suddenly I have life with him. And so to me, Easter is like so critically important, and that's where I get joy. That's where when God shows himself to us through his Son, and you experience Christ for the first time through reading his word, through prayer, through church. It opens up a joy that just never existed before. So I think Easter is the entry to that. So for me, Easter weekend, Holy Week is so important. It's my favorite.
I saw a video, a couple videos, and it was around Easter time. Bart, I don't know if you can pull them up, but did they not just recently discover what is absolutely believed to be the tomb, and that it was completely empty? Like I saw a bunch of TikTok videos where people were just going bananas, where they felt like, and then it was a couple years ago where they discovered, like, where Jesus was crucified, they were able to actually find some actual DNA right through there, through technology, to prove it dates all the way back to Jesus, because of the amount of chromosomes or something in it, where it's like it's human blood, but in order for it to be completely human, it needs to have this many markers in it, and it was short to let him to basically prove.
No doubt. Well, there are all kinds of archaeological discoveries that prove the accounts of Old and New Testament, books of the Bible, and that's been going on. And it sounds like you're talking about the Shroud of Turin. I know that there was there's this shroud that is reported to have been the cloth that they laid over Christ's body, and it kind of made that.
Perhaps,
and it had fibers in it
where he was crucified.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. They were able to identify, where he was crucified, and I don't know. There was like this whole big thing on it. I just found it fascinating.
Yeah, no doubt. No, I mean for centuries, and one of the greatest, more recent, I guess I'd say, although it's a while ago now, but I think it was 1946. They found the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yes,
and those were these ancient fragments of biblical text that, when compared to the modern day texts, they were absolutely accurate. They just proved that the translations have held. And that's one of the things I love about the Bible, is that historically archaeology has proven the text sound, and we have thousands of copies of the original texts and scrolls and papyrus or whatever material they were put on, that just again and again proves how sound and accurate the Bible has been over the century, the millennium. But then we've got books that are never disputed that we have one copy of, like Beowulf or something, and no one ever questions the integrity of that.
So I've got some questions for you.
Sure.
And let me set the table first. Like I'm a man of faith. I believe there's a God. I believe there is a Jesus, and he was here, and now he's not, but he could be coming back pretty soon. Yeah. But you see all this stuff online. Yeah. So I'll give you a few. So we'll have to keep the answers fairly short. But in the Bible, because I'm like I'm like that many pages in.
Okay.
In the Bible, is there actually mention of a firmament, a dome above the earth? Or is there, like, you see all these things about the firmament?
Are you talking about the creation?
The creation of the earth, yes.
I'm not completely familiar with that, but I do know that there's conversations about, and I think there's good arguments to be had of, like, there's like an old earth argument and new earth argument, in terms of, what archaeology shows us about.
Yeah, pull up the firmament, Bart, like the biblical part of the firmament, because I see all this online, and it's like I want to have these conversations with people that are far more tuned into, like, scripture than I am.
Right.
And so anyway, we'll look it up. But let me ask you this one.
Sure.
So there is, in the Bible, they speak of giants, right? Mm-hmm. And people lived for like 1,000 years, right? What, didn't Abraham live the longest or something, like 900 some years?
Right. I don't exactly know.
Okay.
But yes, there were folks who lived hundreds of years.
The Great Flood obviously happened. Do you think it's possible that there were civilizations before that the Great Flood took out? Was the technology better than what we maybe think was it really all just hammer and stone, or was there some greater technology back there that was perhaps a gift from God that it have just been lost in that? Has there been any discussion or thought that goes into some of that stuff?
Oh, for sure. And I think it's entirely possible. I mean, when you don't have a screen to distract you all the time, you actually can get things done. And so, I think that ancient civilizations, we find all kinds of evidence of how advanced they were in understanding, the placement of the stars, and they had nothing but time to study, the movement of the earth and how that all fits together. There was my wife's brother, before I was married, my wife's brother and I went to Ireland, and there's this ancient tomb that was built that once a year the sun is positioned just perfectly, and it, they created this tomb where the sunlight will light up an entire, I think it's, I'm forgetting the name of it. Yep, that's it.
What's it? Where's this at?
This is between Galway and
Ireland Ancient Tomb,
and Dublin. And so once a year, the sun hits the opening of this tomb. It lights up this inner hallway, and then lights up the central tomb and so the ancient folks had nothing but time, and they paid attention to what was happening around them. So I do believe that there were that folks were much more advanced than we realize.
Does the Catholic world ever discuss things like the ancient pyramids and things like that, and how how they were built, because they're in the Bible, right? And so, like, is everything as it seems, right? Or is there a little bit more to the story? Like, was it really just a bunch of slaves that just got whipped to death that just built those things just one at a time? That's that to exact precision? Like what was guiding them to build it that perfectly to where you can't even measure on today's type of tooling the difference in the stones? And to me, if I'm if I'm a hungry, tired slave getting whipped to death, I'm probably not going to be as accurate as that.
Yeah. It's interesting because in the accounts of the Israelites when they were in Egypt, they talked about how they had, plenty of food and meat in their pots. And, when they were wandering in the desert, they were actually thinking back with fondness their time in captivity because they had all these different rich foods. So I don't perceive that their slavery was necessarily, whips and malnourishment or anything. It seems like they had a pretty hearty diet anyway. And so, and I think that I'm inclined to think that it was human ingenuity given by God. But it's fascinating because, even an inch off and those pyramids wouldn't have, worked.
Well, yeah, I mean, that brings up a theory that I've never even thought about, where it's like, well, maybe those people were just that much closer to God. They had more God power going through them. You know what I mean? And
Totally.
as civilizations have grown and grown, have we gotten just farther removed away from God power?
Right.
You know what I mean?
I know exactly.
And maybe that's why people have. No one's writing about giants in the newspaper right now,
Right,
but there's
right.
tons of references to giants in the Bible.
Right.
You know, so I don't know.
I think the Bible gives accounts to, Daniel, who was very close to God, and God blessed him. Joseph is a great example. Joseph from the Old Testament, where, he started as the favorite son. He probably ran his mouth a little bit too much with his brothers, so they sold him into slavery. Shouldn't have done that, but he went from favored son to slave. He was purchased by a wealthy man in Egypt who eventually, because of God's blessing, he was suddenly the head of his household. And he was running this wealthy man's household until this wealthy man's wife tried to seduce Joseph, and he shunned her, so she falsely accused him. Guess what? He's in prison now. So favorite son, slave, head of household, prison. God's with him. He's with God. He doesn't, ever stop worshiping God. And God gives him the ability to interpret these dreams. And that gets word to Pharaoh. He interprets Pharaoh's dreams. Suddenly he's vice president of Egypt. So, here's a man who was committed to God no matter what happened in his life, through the ups and downs. I want to be like Joseph. I want to worship God like that when things are going great, when things are going terribly, because God is in control of our career trajectories. And so I'd like to be more like that. In fact, Charles Spurgeon, again, one of my favorites, said, my friend, when life pushes you into the dirt, worship there. And I think that's what we should be doing at all times.
That's nice.
So, yeah. And for the record, I'm not Catholic. So, when you ask about what Catholics are talking about, I might know more than some because I work at a Catholic institution and I'm very much engaged with it. I attend Mass on campus sometimes, and so I'm definitely a part of the community and love that, but I'm definitely not a Catholic theologian. For the record, I'd like
I asked
to be able
Jeremy
to say
this.
more.
I asked Jeremy this question. When did you honestly, like in your heart, become really close to God and religious?
Yeah.
Right.
So I can relate to Nicodemus in the Gospels. So Nicodemus was this lifelong Pharisee. He was part of the Sadducees, this ruling religious Jewish group of leaders, and he spent his life with the Torah, and he memorized it, and he knew God's word, and he was very much part of this influential group, and it was very powerful. And I believe before he encountered Christ, he was as lost as the worst tax collector out there. And he was curious about Christ. I think that's the Holy Spirit was moving in him. He set up this clandestine, kind of in the middle of night meeting with Christ because he didn't want the Pharisees to know that he was talking to this controversial rabbi. And he has this encounter with Christ, and it transformed him. And a few chapters later in the gospel, he's in the Sanhedrin defending Christ. So he's not completely out, about his support of him, but he's defending him to the Sanhedrin. And then you don't hear anything else about Nicodemus. And he had this encounter with him when he was about 50 or so, many scholars think. The next time you encounter Nicodemus is after Christ is crucified. And he comes out of the shadows, and he brings with him 75 pounds of expensive oils and spices to help bury Jesus, and gave him essentially a king's burial.
Wow.
And he went public. That's him going public. So I've often wondered about what happened to Nicodemus after that. If he was one of the 500 who saw Christ after he resurrected, did he quit the Sanhedrin? Did he get kicked out? Was he a part of some of the early churches? That is lost to history for now, but I can relate to Nicodemus because I grew up going to church and was involved in, different ways through the years as I grew up, but I really got into my career and really made that my focus.
So what, like around 13?
Around
When you
13.
got in, when you really started to get really religious?
It was probably about, I grew up going to church, and so.
But I mean, don't we all grow up kind of being taken to church?
Yeah, that's what it was.
You know what I mean? Like I got taken to church. Like for me, I didn't really get really close with God, up until about, I don't know, 7, 8, 9 years ago.
Well, right, and
kids will do that to you as well.
Totally. Yeah.
So
that was me too, and so it was probably 4 years ago for me.
Okay.
And it was at going to Cormdale. We were attending, and my son, we wanted to raise him in church. And,
sure.
And Pastor Rob, he does what they call, I think it's called expository preaching. So basically, verse by verse. And I didn't like it at first. And I've told him this too, so I'm not revealing anything here. But it wasn't. He taught a hard word, and he confronted my sin. I mean, he didn't know me. He didn't know anything about me, but it felt like he was talking to me, and I didn't like it. And so I would take these notes, and I would try to debunk, what he was saying. And over time, I couldn't deny it. And I, there was one day that I just, the tears started to flow. Believing comes by hearing, and hearing the word of God, and I heard. And I couldn't deny it anymore. And so I went from hating it to loving it. And so it's never been the same since. And I feel like my spiritual birth in Christianity happened really gradually, and then all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Is kind of how I would describe it.
Yeah, I agree. Do you ever feel and I know it's not going to be very Christianly for you to admit it, but do you ever get angry when you see people leveraging maybe a false devotion to God for profit? Meaning, you got some fakes in the religious world, right?
Sure,
I mean, just in any world, right? You got some phonies,
Yeah.
you got some fakes, and they're going to leverage it for gain.
Yeah.
And I mean, yes, we pray for those people. We do all of that. But just as a person, as just a guy, as just Christopher, does it kind of make you mad every once in a while if you see that?
I think so, because it's kind of like the prosperity gospel, like this idea that if you're a Christian, then life will go smoothly for you. But in fact, in Romans 8, Jesus says, or Paul is actually writing to the church in Rome, and he said, that we are fellow heirs with Christ, provided we suffer with him.
Oh, it's way harder to be openly religious and true, not just openly religious.
Yeah.
And because, by the way, a year ago we wouldn't have been jamming about God.
Right.
We just wouldn't. Right. But I'm comfortable enough with that now.
What happened from a year ago because I think I know what you're talking about, but I just...
Oh boy, you're gonna put me on the spot. I'll tell you what, it was about a year ago. I was just kind of at my wit's end with everything.
Okay.
Just I'd taken on way too much stuff.
Yeah.
I just felt way too much pressure.
Yep.
And I just finally was like, I can't do this on my own.
Totally.
And I just, there was I have a 40-minute drive every day to Wilton.
Yep.
So throughout those 40-minute drives, I just got more and more comfortable just verbally saying, just give me a hand, God. Just give me a hand.
People always
and I got a hand. I feel good about it.
No doubt. Well, people always say, God will never give you more than you can handle, but that is absolutely not true. He gives us more than we can.
Oh, yeah.
Because that is what puts us on our knees, and that's where we want to be, because that's where we're powerful.
Yeah.
That's where we're strong, when we're clinging to Christ and working from his strength, not our own strength.
Well, and back to what I was saying, too, it's like it's way harder to go to bed at night and feel like, okay, if God played me back the replay for the day, am I going to pass the red face test? It's hard to get through a whole day knowing that just between you and God, if you're going to be able to pass the red face test. You feel really good on the days you do,
right?
Because you got to give yourself props when you truly believe, you know what, I did really good today.
Yeah.
And then there's other days where you're like, well, yeah, I had to use a mulligan, but that's okay. But I think that's also being comfortable enough to know that, we're just a big sin ball walking around, and
when Jesus taught us to pray, he said, give us this day our daily bread. So he's talking about this is a daily prayer. And then he said, forgive us our trespasses. So he gave us the template for prayer, which included asking for forgiveness. So he knew we were going to be sinning every day. But one of the things I love about Christianity is that in Ezekiel we learn about how the Holy Spirit, he puts his spirit in us. And this passage makes me tremble because he says, I will cause you to walk in my statutes and to be careful to obey my commands. And what that looks like for me is that I used to love my sin and I used to gravitate towards it and want it. And now I hate it, even though sometimes I do it.
Because you recognize it.
And I love Jesus and I love what he wants. And that is a radical transformation. I didn't even want that. And that's the supernatural part of his Holy Spirit living in my chest, which I absolutely love it.
You want to know what turned me off to religion? Like, turned me off for a long time. Multi-level marketing. I was involved in, we've all been involved in a multi-level marketing thing before.
You mean like Amway?
Like Amway. It was actually a company called Advocare.
Okay.
And I love their products.
Yeah.
I still take them. I don't peddle them anymore, but I've always just enjoyed them. Anyway, I got involved with that I was a sophomore in college, right? I got involved in that, and you would go to these gatherings of people because you're and bring your friends, and we can all be friends, and we can all, prosper together kind of thing. Yeah. And there was always this, you would walk in and you would bring people to what they were going to believe was how do I sell vitamins and make money and get healthier while I'm taking them,
right?
To all of a sudden, like, there's like a lot of religious talk, and a lot of people would get up and speak, and they would bring, God and Jesus up and all of that stuff. And when you don't want to hear it,
right,
you don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And so I would be bringing in friends and family to be like, hey, like, check out this stuff. I'm making some good extra money as a college, sophomore here.
But you kind of felt like you were bait and switching when you invited other people.
Well, yeah. And then I kind of had to catch myself a couple times because I would get into religious mode, and I knew in my heart it was fake. It was as fake as it comes. And it was like, I know I'm not being honest with myself here. Yeah. Like, I don't talk to God when I'm alone, right, but I'm bringing him up in public because it makes me sound like I'm a trustworthy vitamin sales guy,
right,
And so that really, and it wasn't just that company, but those type of companies are full of people that, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they're fake. Am I saying some of them are fake? Oh yeah, because I was one of the fakers. Sure. And also, people just want to feel like they belong to something too, so they'll shell out good money to do it. And sadly, I would argue the same reason why people join gangs is the same reason why people join churches, because they just want to belong, and they found someone that makes them feel like they belong, so they gravitate towards that. Yeah. And some people, it's just the wrong end of the coin flip.
No doubt. Well, that's what I love about Coram Deo is that the pastoral team there is not trying to tell people what they want to hear. They're just telling the truth. They're just teaching the Bible. And it can be an uncomfortable truth sometimes. And it's not a marketing scheme. They're not trying to, I think people are hungry for the truth. And I think we know it when we hear it. And so that's one of the things that I think was helpful to me is that we have a pastor who's telling us the truth, and he's not trying to, please the crowd. And I think a pastor's main job is to show me God. I want to see God on Sundays, and I want to, so that I can tremble and worship and remember who I am. And I took my family to the Grand Canyon for spring break standing at the edge of that canyon, John Piper says you don't go to the Grand Canyon to build your self-esteem. It's awesome in the truest sense of the word. And it makes me realize, that there is a God who created this and how
I just had a thought.
Yeah.
So, how do I phrase this? Going back to the multi-level marketing thing, there was some good that I got from that. And one of them was when you're first introducing somebody to AdvoCare, you want to get them interested in the product. Mm-hmm. It's so hard not to spray them with a fire hose. Yeah. You got to just give them a couple drips. Yeah. And you're so excited about the story you want to tell them. You want to tell the story from when the first vitamin was invented, and you're going to blow people away, and all they're going to say is, I don't want anything to do with that. Yeah. Now, let's just replace AdvoCare with your comfort level with God and your relationship with God.
Sure.
When you start to develop one, I believe a true one that I feel like it's a little seedling right now, but I feel like I'm committed to growing this thing, right? It's hard to always remember that not really anyone that I could name in my social life, very few, I think, are at that point.
Right.
And they're certainly not at a Christopher Waugh's point. The passion that you have is just radiating off you. And so, it's so hard to just remember not to fire hose somebody because it's such a turnoff for someone who's just maybe willing to take a little drip, right? Yeah. And that's a challenge that I think a lot of true believers face because you're so overwhelmed with excitement. Yeah. And you just want to, if anyone could just get a little taste of what I got. Yeah. And then people get fire hosed and then they're like, that's a cult. You know what I mean?
I hear you. And and you're really easy to talk with. And so, and you've asked really great questions that have kind of elicited some, responses from me. This isn't probably a typical conversation that I have, and yet I'm having it on, TV. But
it's kind of fun, ain't it?
But it is kind of fun. But I will say this,
how do you navigate through that?
Here's what I anchor it on. I love that God is in control of it. His Spirit is working, and I think it's 1 Corinthians says the word of the cross is folly to those who are perishing, but to those who are being saved, it's the power of God. And so, to me, that tells me that God's Spirit is working. And when I went to Coram Deo for the first time, I wasn't loving it. I was actually hating it. And but yet God did work. And so I don't worry too much about, I just want to tell people, I don't think I'm qualified to teach, but I certainly can tell people what happened. And, and so that to me is what I do. But to your point, I'm not like this with everybody who comes into my office or, things like that. Right now we're having a really fun and open conversation, but eventually for some folks it does go to there. And it's funny, we kind of find each other. We were having furniture delivered one day, and within 5 minutes I was helping the delivery guy, move the furniture, and within 5 minutes we found each other. We were talking about God, and it was just great. So, I think it's a great question. I think we need to be mindful of audience at all times for sure.
Yeah. How long have we been yammering on? An hour already. Jeez.
Just to go fast.
This is fun. Real quick, though, let's just change gears. Yes or no? Are there underground tunnels at Ambrose?
There are underground tunnels.
And what was it from?
Infrastructure. Just,
Not underground railroad.
Not that I'm aware of. Although there is one tunnel that goes between Ambrose Hall that I was telling you about in Higgins Hall, which we use all the time. We've turned it into just it's a great place to get from one building to the next on a rainy day or a snowy day. So we do have underground tunnels, no doubt.
Okay,
I
well, that's
can
confirmed
affirm
too.
I can't confirm the ghost, but I
Can't
can
confirm the ghost.
I can confirm the stories and
All
the
right.
tunnels.
And I did mention in my promo, you do work out. Like, are you just working out on campus, or do you go to a gym around town?
So that's another Ambrose connection. I have there's a kinesiology professor who, he is a good friend of mine, and we pray together and talk about God a lot. And he is he's someone I think I want to talk with him about possibly being on your show. I think you'd have a lot of fun with him.
Yeah.
He is Catholic for sure, and could tell you all of your Catholic.
Tell him I want to ask him about the firmament. I want to know if it's true.
I will ask him. But
Okay.
he is he's helped me get involved with working out, and I work out. I've just started in July, but I used to be able to do 0 pull-ups. Now I'm up to 11. So
It's more than I can do.
it's just I'm a middle-aged man, and so I work out for longevity. I work out to feel good. I sleep better. I think I do better work. When I'm healthier and taking care of myself. I have a 12-year-old son. I want to, my days are numbered by God, but I want to feel as good as I can for the time that I have. So I love it. It's been a lot of fun, and my son and I work out together, so it's been a good.
He's just at that right age where
Yeah.
he's just now getting into it. That I showed a couple pictures earlier, and he's a good-looking young man.
He looks like his mother, thankfully.
That's great. You got anything else you want to plug while you're here? You got like a Twitter handle you want to give out or anything like that?
I quit social media about a year ago.
Oh, I bet you feel so good. I bet you feel so good.
I know. I haven't missed it actually. I'm a lot less angry than I was, because usually it would just kind of get me fired up. So
We couldn't tag you in anything.
I
When
know,
I was like, I can't even tag the guy.
I'm sorry, I'm not on Facebook or Twitter or
Yeah.
Instagram. I used Instagram for work for I hung on to that for a little bit, but I'm connecting with students face to face. I don't need Instagram to do it. So unfortunately, I don't have anything to plug like that. Other than it was fun to talk about St. Ambrose. There's a lot of really exciting things going on, and it was a pleasure to.
I can see us doing this again. This would be fun.
I'd love to.
Christopher Waugh, everybody, thank you so much for joining Joe Brameyer